The following was recorded live at Conference21, May 21st to 23rd, 2021.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Solve, Improve, Repeat. 8 easy steps or 8 steps to solve almost any problem. I won't say that they're easy. I'm Mike Soltiro. I will take you through today's presentation and talk. I'll point out here on the first slide that in the bottom left-hand side of each of our slides today, there'll be book recommendations of books that I've either read or been recently recommended myself, and along with 2 apps, Hoopla and Libby, where they are currently available through local libraries, either audiobooks or the good old paperback digital versions, where you can read them or listen to them as with no charge. So if you've got a local library card, check out those book recommendations. If nothing else, there are some good books that are listed here. So we won't do a full meet and greet up front, but if you're interested, shoot a note into the chat box, ask me a question, I can invite you on stage. We can do some would you rathers, some fun, some work related, some not work related. 20 seconds about me. I'm in lovely Cape Cod, Massachusetts. We have a beautiful sunny day here today. I work in real estate. I get to wear many different hats. I'm an attorney, so I close transactions. I also work with the brokerage, Kinlin Grover here, where I help people buy and sell property. And I'm also a real estate coach, work with real estate professionals across the country on optimizing their real estate business, AccomplishedRE. You'll see our logo in the bottom corner of your slides as well. Some basic rules. If you are interacting today, please be respectful. Ask questions. If you've got examples, it will help with our frameworks that we're going to go over today. And if I'm going too fast, please tell me to slow down. I will toggle to the chat box as well. So please feel free. All right, it's just a basic introduction. We're going to go over 2 high-level frameworks that are going to help us as we look to solve problems. Keeping in mind that these are simply frameworks or blueprints. They are not necessarily how to solve every problem. Every problem is different. So these frameworks are going to be tweaked and they are going to be leveraged in a different way for each different problem and how you are looking to move forward or to get to the finish line that you're looking for. Keep in mind the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, the exact framework is going to apply, but there are going to be situations where you're going to need to differentiate or to put your own twist on it. Keep in mind that presentations like this, there are things that are going to be very applicable and some things that you are going to need to tweak. So if there's just one thing that you take away today, look for those nuggets and see how you can apply it to your current situation. So the first framework that we're going to go over is the PDCA model. Is anyone familiar with this, or has anyone worked with this before? Okay, no problem. So before we do that, a quick backstory which might help as we walk through these frameworks. First, as I mentioned, I work in real estate. At a open house that I was hosting a few years ago, I got into the house early, got it all ready for all of the guests, had the lights on, was excited. And then right before it was about to start, I went upstairs to the upstairs bathroom and realized there was water all over the floor. And I was thinking, all right, I have to act quickly. I need to quickly take care of this because people are on their way here. So got some paper towels, got some old towels, cleaned up all the water off the floor, made sure it was dry, threw away the paper towels, got rid of the old towels, tucked them away in the garage so nobody could see them. Floor was dry, all good. Head back in, meet the guests. I think it was the second couple that came in that day. We're touring the house, we get to the upstairs bathroom, and the floor is all wet again. So my big plan to remedy my problem of a wet floor did not work. I cleaned up all the water on the floor, but there was actually a leaky pipe which was continuing to leak after I'd wiped up all the water. and my problem persisted. So I solved the wrong problem. So as we go through the PDCA model or the framework, we'll learn why that was incorrect and what I could have done instead. So the first step is plan. I had a plan. My plan was get paper towels, get a towel. But as we walk our way through the rest of this formula, we'll see where I went wrong and how I actually solved the wrong problem. So my plan, get something to wipe off the water off the floor, which I did. It seemed to make a lot of sense. But the problem I was solving was the wet floor and not a leaky pipe. Had I gone further and diagnosed what the actual issue was, I could have solved my actual problem. So the D in is just do. And I did, just like my plan told me to do. I got the paper towels, I dried the floor. I'm all set, right? No, I wasn't, because as we'll find out, there are 2 more steps. But a lot of you may work in organizations or in your personal life may find that this is where we often stop in our planning and our problem solving. We have a plan, we execute on the plan, and that's it. We don't check to see if we actually solved the problem that we had or if we got to the right finish line or the target that we were hoping for. So we'll have a plan and we'll execute on it. And that's about it. That can be frustrating, as we see here in my situation. I thought I did a great job, but I didn't follow through and I still had my problem that I started with. So understanding that this is a 4-step formula or a 4-step plan is important. Also, when planning and executing, keeping in mind the idea of a strategy and logistics. So strategy is your big picture goals, the how you do things, your company culture, or the why behind what you're doing. The logistics are the step-by-step of how to accomplish those things. So keeping in mind that you need to have both a big picture strategy as well as what are the detailed steps I need to take to get me there. So here is where my open house story of the leaky pipe illustrates my biggest mistake. Check. If I had simply checked after I planned, got my paper towel, execute, cleaned it up, and then went to go check on it afterward, I'd realize, hey, that wasn't enough. That wasn't the solution to my problem. My problem wasn't actually that the floor was wet. My problem was that it was a leaky pipe. I've checked it. I realized I don't have the tools to solve this. I need to bring in a professional. Can I get a plumber here? I need to close off this bathroom. Maybe mention to people coming to my open house, please don't go in there. You might slip and fall, and remedy this carefully. So if I had checked, I would have learned the mistakes of just stopping after planning and executing. And that's the 4th step of our initial 4-step framework here. Act and adjust. When we check, we see that we haven't got to our proper target, we haven't solved the right problem, or that we are someplace we weren't anticipating, figure out the why and make the proper adjustments. So in my example, if I had used a professional, I wouldn't have the problem of a wet floor because I would have checked and realized that my remedy wasn't enough to solve the problem. So I actually, another story here. I worked at a company which was excellent at surveying its clients. We had a plan to get a certain number of surveys done each month. We did the surveys and the information was funneled up to the next department. And that was pretty much it. We never checked if our numbers hit the targets that we were looking for, if we were on point with what our forecasts were that we planned. Let's get some surveys, execute or do, let's get the surveys done. And that was it. Had we checked, we might have known, oh, we're actually getting too many or not enough, or we need to actually expand into this market or find out more about this type of properties that we're working with. So it's important to understand the check and adjust part of this 4-piece framework to make sure we're hitting the correct targets, solving the right problems. And if there are if there are situations where we are not solving the right problems, figuring out why and adjusting to solve the correct issue. So there's a summary of our 4-step framework, PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. So this is fairly basic, very straightforward, and it will also encompass the 8-step problem-solving approach that we're about to go to next. I will just take the time to repeat here that these two frameworks are just blueprints. You do not need to necessarily follow each step in detail, and they're not all equally weighted. It's not 25% each, that there might be much more importance on having a very detailed plan or being able to execute multiple logistical steps to complete your vision or your strategy. The check might be quick, but it might be vital. Again, using my wet floor example, had I checked, there was a very small amount of time or that it would have taken me to do that, but I overlooked that step, and the adjustment I would have made would have fixed my actual problem. So understanding that the relationship between these four is not necessarily equal as far as time or energy, but they all do play a part in coming to the proper resolution. So I'll just take a step back there. I don't see any questions in the chat right now. That's our high-level overview of Plan, Do, Check, Act, and we're going to see how that incorporates to our more in-depth 8-step problem-solving plan. So let's get into the 8 steps. So, does anyone know what these are? Of course you do. Yes, the Washington, D.C. monuments, specifically the Lincoln and the Jefferson memorials. Back in the late 80s, the National Park Services had an issue with these memorials. They were spending way too much money on cleanup. And the reason for that, before I get into that, does anyone familiar with the story? Okay, no, okay. What was happening was there was a high level of bird droppings every day on each of these memorials, each of these monuments. So they were spending a lot of money on cleaning supplies, on extra and overtime staff to have the memorials cleaned and have them ready for the next day's visitors. So they needed to solve this problem. They were spending way too much money on the cleanup. So there was an article, Why You Need to Ask Why, written about this very situation in the Huffington Post. And they came up with these solutions based on the problem I just described. A lot of bird droppings, spending way too much money on cleanup, way too much money on overtime. What should be done? So often in our professional lives, we jump to hire more workers. That's our first thing. Or the second thing, ask our current staff to do more or work overtime. So is that going to be the answer here? Because that's generally where we'll stop. Similar to my open house example. We have a plan or we have a problem, we plan something, we execute, and hopefully it works. We don't take the time to check or to adjust if we don't get to the right target. These are some of these other solutions, other cleaning materials that might help. The tongue-in-cheek here, bird poison or hire hunters, probably not feasible and not appropriate. Encase in plexiglass. Just the cost there is going to be pretty prohibitive, and it's going to change the nature of the memorial. Move it to a different part. Same, probably not feasible. And then close it all together to the general public. So these were ideas that came up right away when it's like, hey, we're spending way too much money on cleanup. What should we do? So the reason we're using this example is it's going to highlight each of our steps, and it's going to really focus on why we need to solve the actual problem that we have and not just solve what is a symptom or what the problem that we think we have, like my wet floor. So the first step is, what is your problem? And this may sound silly, but think about it. I thought I had a wet floor problem. No, it was a leaky pipe problem. So quote here from Charles Kettering, a problem well stated is half solved. Do you understand what your current situation is and why it's a problem? Because if you do, you'll be halfway to solving it. So with the DC Monument example, the problem is we're spending way too much money on cleanup. But as we'll find out, and we dig deeper, it's actually a bigger problem. We want to look at things like, when is our problem happening? Where is it happening? What exactly is going on? What's the frequency or the severity? And what's the impact? So if we can answer those things, we've got a pretty good idea of the current situation or our problem, and we can put a solution that works to eradicate the root cause of that problem and not solve for something else. So next we go to the situation. This is linked right after our problem because we need to be able to get others on board to help us solve in many of our instances, both personally and professionally. We want to be able to explain the situation to someone else, someone who's not familiar with the details, the jargon. Can you explain it to a 5-year-old? Sometimes visuals are really, really helpful. Graphs, numbers, charts, something that says, hey, this is a problem. Let me show you why. Take a look at this. Let me illustrate it to you. Make it painfully clear to them. This is something that needs to be remedied immediately. We sometimes in our organizations will fall into situations where people in different departments, higher up managers who have never actually been to the place where the work is happening, are trying to solve from afar, and they didn't actually go and see the problem, or they don't speak to the people who are living this every day. So being able to touch, feel, and interact with the problem, and those who see it every day, is also vital. Make sure that you have both problem-solving experts in the room as well as people who are intimately familiar with the problem. Can they communicate with each other? Can you make it painfully clear what's going on, why it's a problem, and why it needs to be solved? Then you want your target. Where do you want to be ultimately? For the space between the situation and the target is your gap. We're looking to mine that gap. You want to move from where you are currently to your end target. Looking back at my wet floor example, I wanted the floor dry. I got the floor dry, but that was the wrong target. What I wanted to do was actually fix the pipe. So you need to go back, understand what's actually happening, and what can you do to solve it. Probably in other areas you've had goal setting conversations, and the term SMART goal comes up. That's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. I'm not as keen on making sure you've got all 5 of those things, but think in those terms as far as here's what we need to do to solve our situation. We need to have this in place by this date for it to work. Thinking back to the DC example, our target is we need to be on budget for what we can spend on cleaner and on cleaning our cleaning budget altogether. We can't be having this kind of overtime where we're almost at 200% of our budget every quarter, because we're not going to be able to maintain the current situation. We're spending way too much money. So we need to get to X by this date. And as we move on, we'll see this is the big step that the DC example will help illustrate. What is the reason for our problem? This is a problem because. So this is our real why, or the actual root cause. We want to drill down and understand what's happening and why it is occurring. Once we get through it with the DC example, we'll see that it's kind of oversimplifying, but it really illustrates the point well. So we'll go through it. So what is our problem? Well, there's a lot of bird droppings on the monuments every day. Okay, well, why is that? Is there a lot of birds in DC? Is this all over Washington, DC? Is this an issue? No, not really. We've got the same number of birds anywhere else. But we found out that the birds are attracted to the monuments because they eat spiders, and there's a lot of spiders there. Oh, okay. So is that our problem? Do we have a lot of spiders in the area? That again, is this a DC issue, or is this a monument where they're physically located? Maybe we want to use that move them situation. Oh no, it's not a DC or where they're located in the city situation. The spiders come here because there's a lot of midges here. Oh, all right. Well, same question. Are the monuments attracting those midges? Why are they there? Why are the midges coming to the monument? Well, I'm glad you asked why. Well, the midges are attracted to the lights at the monuments. Oh, okay. So lights are on, the midges attract to the light, spiders come to eat the midges, birds come to eat the spiders. I got it. But then, aren't there midges everywhere? Why are they coming to these lights? Oh, I'm glad you asked why. Well, we turn our lights on an hour before dusk. And in that hour, there is no other brighter light anywhere in the general vicinity. So all of the midges in the area are drawn to these lights, and that's what brings them here. And that gets us to the spiders, to the birds, and then ultimately the bird dropping. Oh, I see. So having the lights come on an hour early attracts the midges, and that's what's bringing the birds ultimately. Yes, it's the lights, and it's the timing of the lights. So we learned the actual reason for our problem is not because the cleaning crew is lazy, not because they need additional staff or need to work overtime. They don't need additional products or use something different. We don't need to put plexiglass to keep any of these insects or animals away. It's actually the timing of the lights. So what they actually did to solve this problem is they turned the lights on an hour later. They waited till dusk, put the lights on when there was other activities lit up in the general vicinity. So they weren't the sole attraction for the midges, which brought the spiders, which brought the birds, which brought the droppings. So in putting that together, they realized this actually has nothing to do with our staffing levels, the cleaning supplies we're using, the number of hours. It has to do with when we turn the lights on, which is a completely different problem than we started with. So using my example of the wet floor versus leaky pipe, and then this example of we're paying too much in overtime when really we just turn our lights on too early, we need to know what the actual situation is if we want to put an effective solution in place. So knowing the reason, the root cause, or the actual why behind it. So you may not need to ask why 5 times like we did there, but look at this list of solutions again. None of them would have addressed the actual problem. And the first 2, probably where we would have stopped in our organizations professionally. We would have said, all right, well, let's bring in a couple more employees, or let's ask our current employees to work harder or more hours. That would have not got to the cause. That probably would have angered the employees. That would have spent more money. None of the things that would have actually addressed the actual problem. And to answer you, yes, this did take care of it. They put the lights on an hour later, and then all of a sudden that they were not using so much time to remedy the cleaning, or to spend on cleaning and overtime. So that's why knowing the root cause, the actual problem, is so important. So number 5, once we know the root cause, what's our answer? And we'll see the last 4 steps are going to mirror that PDCA approach that we talked about up front. In this 8-step framework, PDCA is actually going to be the last 4 steps. So the answer, or our plan. We might need to have a couple possible solutions that we want to put in place. Again, use the people in the room, use problem-solving experts, get them together, brainstorm, and figure out how can we solve what's actually happening, what the root cause is, and what is realistic as far as what we can expend as far as resources, and how can we put a viable solution in place. Test them, grade them out, see which one is most viable, which one can be done, and whichever is the best solution, move forward. So that's our plan. Our next step to do, the resolution, is to actually execute on that plan. So we talked about what that means. A lot of us are familiar. We're great at planning. We're great at executing. We understand our problem. We have our plan that we weighed our possible 3 solutions. This was the best. Let's execute on that plan. But don't stop there. Planning and doing, it's easy to stop. We want to, just like we're checking here, what are the results? Do we get the results that we wanted to? Did we hit our target? Was it the right target? Why or why not? Having that understanding is of utmost importance, because what we're ideally doing is we are solving the problem for good. We do not want the problem to come back again later, like my wet floor and leaky pipe. We do not want the problem to come back in a different version, like we would have had we you just hired more employees or threw more money at the problem at the DC example. We want to fix the problem going forward. So we want to understand the results and make sure that we hit the right target. And then finally, for the adjust piece or the improvement, there's a couple things that we want to do. We want to continuously improve. Is there a better way to implement the solution that we put in place? Is there a faster way to do it? Is there a smarter way? Can we do it with less money, more efficient, more effective way? Ask all those questions to see if we can always improve on that plan that we have in place. And then we also want to look at unintended consequences. Because how many times, let's say we have a problem, we go through these steps, we execute perfectly, we solve that problem, but now there's a situation that we didn't account for, and we actually have a worse situation than when we started with, or a different situation, another problem that we need to solve for. So thinking about that in terms of the DC example, so the hour before dusk, the lights are off. What does that mean for them? Are they attracting other animals? Are they attracting other insects? Something they need to look into. Did their numbers of visitors go down in that hour that people weren't comfortable without the lights on? So these are questions that they need to look into and see, were there unintended consequences that were a result of solving the initial problem. So here's a summary of the 8 steps. Feel free to navigate to AccomplishedRE.com. There's a worksheet there that'll work you through. And in just a high level, the problem. What is actually wrong? Situation. Can you explain it to somebody who's not living it every day? Can you make it painfully clear? Hey, this is a problem and why? Target where you want to go. The reason. Here is the actual situation. Here's the actual reason, the root cause of why this is happening. And this is what's keeping us from our target. The answer. How can we get to where we need to be? How can we hit our target? Resolution. How can we execute on the plan? So 5, 6, 7, 8, plan, do, check, act. 7, the results, check. Did our plan solve the problem that we wanted to? And finally, 8, the improvement. Can we continue to improve on our plan? Can we make it better, faster? Can we spend less money with it? What unintended consequences have happened or are happening that we didn't anticipate that we may now need to solve a different problem for? So going back through the steps. So in comparison, we've got 2 frameworks here. The PDCA approach, which we can use if there is a current problem or opportunity, and then an 8-step, which builds off that PDCA for specific problems or issues that might come up personally or professionally. So I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat. So we'll just go ahead. We've got one other example of problem solving and how jumping to the first conclusion we can think of is not always right. It might be detrimental to our business. So there was a story of, and I'll highlight because it's the book that's here, The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. He talks about a situation or an example of a street vendor in New York City who sold donuts and coffee. And he noticed that every workday around 9 o'clock, his line was very long, and he would have regular customers at the end of the line who were frustrated and upset, would leave line because they couldn't get donuts and coffee in time for them to make it to work. So he was losing business. He had a terrible feeling that his customers were going somewhere else. They were unhappy, and that they were very frustrated. So he wanted to alleviate that. He's losing money and he's losing customers. That's what a business like him needs. So we think, what should he do? Well, let's look at the 2 solutions that were right at the top of the DC monument list. Let's hire more employees. Let's throw more money at the problem. He didn't do either of those things. He drilled down, put into a place, and using our framework, let's see what would work. Problem. At between 8 and 9 every morning at the stand, there are frustrated customers leaving. And they're either going somewhere else or they're not coming back. And I'm losing business, I'm losing money, and I'm angering my regulars. So what's the situation? Just picture unhappy customers. Explain that to somebody else. Lost money. Those are 2 things a small business can't have. What do you want? The opposite of that. Happy. Your target should be happy customers and to increase revenues as much as you can. So what was his answer? What was his solution that he put into place? It wasn't more employees and it wasn't more money. To the side of the cart, he built out a little table where he put coffee, donuts, and a place where people could pay and make their own change. So the regulars would come right up. They would take the coffee or donuts they wanted, make their change, and go on their way. Well, you're thinking, well, I don't know if that's going to work. People are going to just take and not pay, or how is that going to work out? Well, that was kind of the story that Covey was telling, that the speed of trust, that the trust that the stand owner had placed in his regular customers who he had known, had a relationship with, wanted them to be happy, wanted them to make it to work on time. They happily met his trust with their loyalty, and they paid. And within 1 week of implementing this new system, he was seeing double the money at his stand. Not because he hired somebody else, not because he threw more money at the problem, just because he diagnosed what was happening. He had unhappy regular customers and put a solution in place that worked for both of them. And having that was something that they wanted. They're happy. He's making more money. That's the 2 things that he set out to accomplish. So The real takeaway from all of these problems is don't just jump to what you think an answer to the problem is. Understand your problem first and put in a viable, effective solution. And then make sure that you get to the right finish line or the right target. Because you might solve a problem, but it might not be the right problem and it might come back. Or you might create a whole new problem for yourself and you might be back at step one without even realizing it or realizing it too late. The last thing that I'll say is it's really easy to put a plan into place, work on the plan, and that's it. You will need to go through all of the steps. Have that plan, have that strategy, have the step-by-step of what you need to execute, and don't stop there. Check, make sure you've got to the right place, and then put in the adjustments or the improvements as needed on the back end to make sure that you are solving your actual problem and you're helping the people that you want to help, getting the results that you deserve and are looking for. So that wraps us up today. I don't see any more questions. Please feel free to contact me if you do. His best number and email for me. Thank you for your time. Thank you to Michael for putting on Conference 21. This has been a fantastic experience. I look forward to next steps and where we're headed. It's very exciting, and I wish you all the best. And